Today I'm Juliana Drever, and this is Dylan
Gautier.
And we are the co-curators for Art Not Places this year. And I guess we're going to start today with a very, very quick overview of the festival, because we're standing up here with the breeze in our hair. So we're just going to tell you a little bit about the festival, a little bit about what we're thinking about in terms of our curatorial priorities, how we're defining public space, how we're defining interaction with public space, and then we're going to walk along 14th Street to Avenue C, and we'll be stopping at some places along the way, and we'll be sort of fielding questions from you as we go. So,
and I think maybe for the walk, one thing we had thought about was taking sort of a cue from the idea of a sound walk, where you really are trying to focus on the space more than ask questions as we're walking. So as we stop, maybe we'll talk a little bit, depending on how warm or how cold we are. But as we go, we're just, I think, going to be observing and trying to pick up on, really the cultures involved on 14th Street, the various types of infrastructure, the other types of interactions and exchanges that are happening, and just trying to absorb as much as possible. So kind of as an idea. But also, as I mentioned to people who were here earlier, we're going to sort of convene at 3 p.m. at the Tiki Bar on 14th Street and Avenue B, which is Otto's Shrunken Head. So if you know Otto's, and just pick that place because it's sort of where we're ending up. So if you end up wandering on your own or needing to duck in someplace to get warm, we'll be there at 3 p.m. and we can also talk then and follow up. I also have some note cards that I thought I would pass around if anybody has any dexterity at this point, which I don't. But if you wanted to write down any questions and an email and needed to take off at any point, you could just pass those and we'll get back to you as well. So really excited to see everybody out here, and thanks for coming out. And I think, do you want to talk a little bit about Art Not Places this year?
So Art Not Places is an annual public space and public art festival. It's been happening along 14th Street since I think about 2008, although this is its 10th iteration. And we are, it's a thematic festival. This year's theme is free. And through the open call for proposals, which is currently out, we are asking you to submit ideas to us that kind of tease out all of the subjectivities of what free could mean. If it's in terms of collective or personal freedoms, or projects that are just completely feral, it really could run the gamut of what freedom means, what it means to be free. And there's on the call for proposals, there is a kind of collection of ideas that we had about what freedom could mean as a kind of starting point for you. But it's completely open to however you want to define that. And when we think about public space with Art Not Places, Ed Woodham, who's the founder and director who did meet us along our walk today, defines it as a space at which you don't have to open a door to get to. So when you're thinking about the sites for your proposals and for your projects, that can be a really big consideration, that you don't have to open a door to get to the place you're presenting your work. It's on the streets. Everything is outside and accessible to passersby along 14th Street. We also are thinking, in terms of our curatorial priorities, about projects that engage with the social landscape of 14th Street, the political landscape, the cultural landscape. They could be object or non-object oriented, although I would say that since this is not a permitted festival, that you have to consider that in your proposal, that you can't obstruct pedestrian traffic, you can't obstruct vehicular traffic. And so typically I think a lot of the projects that are part of the festival tend to be transient. They're constantly moving, they're ephemeral, they're sort of meant to not stick around for a long period of time. There's not going to be anyone guarding your work, so if there's something extremely valuable, you're not going to leave that on the street. And I think that there's, because this is a sort of a voluntary thing that you're showing up for, like we're both volunteers, Ed's a volunteer, everyone's sort of participating freely in this. There's no sort of legal structure or accountability. Like everyone who participates of their own free will. So if you do want to do something completely feral and chaotic, you know, that's going to be part of your proposal, but that's also your responsibility to take on whatever sort of outcomes are a result of that.
And yeah,
if our artwork kills somebody, it's our fault.
There have been.
If we would accept an idea like that.
Yeah, and somebody, Ben asked earlier what the difference was between having a piece in the festival and not in the festival, because the festival is this unpermitted, voluntary experience, and I think the best thing we can say is to be in the festival, there are certain kinds of organizational tools that we use. So there's a printed map. There are other materials that are distributed on the day of, and there are people, volunteers also, who are out on the streets wearing Art Not Places shirts that are directing people toward various centers of activity. Because 14th Street is it's the widest street, the widest place in Manhattan. It's a very very long street, and I'm sorry, it's the longest street, and so it's also very wide. There's always this question of, you know, having some kind of how do you have sort of convergences happen around particular sites, and, you know, at certain points in the festival you can walk down the street and not know that there's a festival happening. So what we're talking about is, you know, ways to sort of plan things where there would be kinds of you know, coming together around a certain time or a certain place, and we'll kind of point out what we feel like some of those places might be, but we're also really open to proposals that take that into account. The other point I'd add is that because it's a 3-day festival, I mean, it actually starts Thursday, and someone was asking, does it, you know, are there times 9 a.m. to 5 p.m.? Not really. I mean, we've been soliciting work from people who might do projections overnight, who are thinking about doing, you know, durational endurance pieces like the one we're doing right now, you know, where they're out actually for long periods of time over the weekend. And then there are, you know, I think there are opportunities to do things that might happen at a few different, you know, at, let's just say 11 a.m. on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I think that we're kind of open to all of these different ideas and uses of time. Also thinking about free and sort of free time, and the fact that, you know, we're all unpaid in this, and so there is a question of our using our resources and labor to the best effect. So for you, what that'll mean, you know, is different than what it might mean for somebody else. What else?
I think in terms of thinking about locations and sites, a few words of advice, if we can offer them. I know that, for example, the area between 9th Avenue or 11th Avenue and 9th Avenue, I'm told, is heavily policed, as is obviously Union Square, which I know is a popular choice because it's so central. But in those busier areas, it's going to be more difficult logistically to figure out how things can work. I think that as we get further east, things get quieter and more residential. Although at the very far end where the Con Edison plant is, again, that's a very that's an area with high surveillance. So if you think that might have an effect on your project, those are some things to keep in mind as you're considering, you know, different spots along the road.
And we could say positive or negative effect, because there are certainly, you know, there are closed caption, or I'm not closed, there are cameras that you can actually get access to. Some people have used that fact in the past as well as a reason to make it work. So, but yeah, just to kind of be aware of that. And what else? Yeah. Oh, and I think just, you know, what I'm excited about in working with the festival and with artists like yourselves is this idea that that it is public space, it's a public thoroughfare, and so, you know, like why do you need to ask permission to be in it? You don't generally ask permission to walk down the street. So sort of what are the limits of, you know, what we can do, or how do we push those boundaries as artists in the city, especially in a place where space is such a difficult thing to get and to hold. And so I like this idea that it's an unpermitted, kind of uninvited festival, and everything that goes along with that, complications and, you know, generative effects as well. And hopefully you'll be interested in that.
So, do you want to introduce?
Oh, right, yeah. So I think we should, let's see. Oh, I was going to say one thing, just a few sites that might be of interest. You know, we can also consider things like the High Line, which is also a public space. It rises right there above 14th Street. So there are sort of some spaces that, you know, tucked off to the side. Somebody was asking about this pier over here. In the past, there have been things there as well. We're also looking into some of the vacant storefronts, which kind of goes against the idea that you shouldn't have to enter a space, but there are a lot of them right now, more than I remember when I used to live here, and there's on the 14th Street rather, and so there is a possibility that we'll be able to get one of those as a place for people to sort of gather and warm up from time to time. In the past, we've had partnerships with like Pratt or
Theater Lab.
Yeah, so there's potential to have sort of spaces that you can rest in indoors on 14th Street, and we'll try to secure those as well. We'll know more about that later.
I think that we should start walking. Or questions.
Yeah, are there any sort of quick questions from people before we start walking and or concerns?
Yeah, just a general thing about like it's a public space, unpermitted, so use of like public property or the front of private property. Like I saw a few images on the website. Like, do you engage to get permission? Is it a non-asking kind of thing?
I think we encourage that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do people do like work with private businesses or the?
Yes. If you want to use, for example, a storefront, you would approach that merchant and you would say, "I have this idea," and you can work with us to do that. We have some like template letters of inquiry so that you can make a formal ask.
We're also willing to help write letters for things. I mean, that's sort of part of what we'll be doing. As I was saying, for people coming, international artists who are coming who might be applying for funding to get here and things, we're happy to write letters. If you have a funding source that you feel like you need for your project and need a letter of support, we're very happy to provide a letter of support. Similarly, to make introductions to people that we might know in the neighborhood. We're also, once the kind of application process goes through, we will have a meeting where we'll discuss different resources for people looking to do work and involving things like that. So, yeah. Did you have a quick question?
Essentially the same question, and it's an unpermitted thing. But if I'm looking at Windows and being able to use Windows and stuff, and making sure it's okay to solicit permission to be able to do this to ensure that they can stay longer potentially, or
Yeah, I think the idea of the festival is it can offer those kinds of support. So I think we're gonna walk and then stop. I think we should stop on the corner.